Okay.
Wow,
Hey.
that was
I
new.
First of all, welcome everybody to Containers from the Couch. Um, you may have noticed if you've been watching us over the past couple weeks, we have a more enhanced graphic when coming in. You'll see some nicer graphics. Brent, is there anyone you want to give a shout out to on that? Because I think it's really awesome.
I would like to thank my lovely wife for that. She did an amazing job, and I think we might have the best intro of anyone streaming on this channel. I don't know,
Whoa.
maybe not, but I bet there's a little bit of jealousy happening right now. We'll see.
And listen, potentially you're a little biased, but I have to
Fair
say
enough. Fair enough.
I'm very impressed with this and I love it. So I don't know if I should mention her by name, but Brent's wife, thank you. So yeah,
Thank you.
privacy reasons, I'm going to respect that. But anyway, so welcome everybody. If you have not tuned in before, we call our show Containers from the Couch. We talk things containers on AWS. So we talk ECS, EKS, ECR, kind of anything in the containers world that relates to AWS. And specifically, today what we're going to talk about is a new command line tool utility that's coming out in the future. It's in beta right now. It's called Copilot. It's essentially the second version of our AWS CLI, but I would say it's the new and improved and very opinionated version of that.
Thank you for saying that. Yes, opinionated. I think this is something that a lot of people they may realize they want it. They may not realize that that's what they are wanting. Is when we talk to customers, a lot of times they're just saying, "Tell me what to do," and so this CLI just sort of bakes all that in, and we're able to to sort of walk you through here's what you should do when you want to run your containers on ECS and especially on Fargate. So uh, by the way, Twitch, we have never done this before. We've never used the CLI before, so that's why in the title I put unboxing, because like we're gonna figure this out and we're gonna all figure it out together and see what it can do.
Yes, and it's so the only thing we've done prerequisite wise is I have set up just my credentials to make sure they work. I have a Cloud9 IDE set up ready to go, and I cloned some repositories that we're going to test this with. So I love that you called it unboxing, by the way. So awesome. Like that's well
I
said.
was I was trying to figure out how to work containers into it, like, but you know, that would have just been too cheesy, I think.
Yeah.
I'm
So
pretty cheesy already.
right, we have a lot of cheesiness. I'm with you there. So what do you say we just get into it, Brent? Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
So also, I think it's important to mention that I believe we have some folks from the Copilot team in the chat at some point. They'll be in and out.
Yep.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, at least at the beginning, we have some folks that they are on the Copilot team and they're actively working on Copilot and they want your input. So I'll start off just by saying that, one of the first things or one of the best ways that you can contribute is uh, check out the GitHub page. They're doing all of this work in the open, and if you test this out, if you do your own unboxing, and you find something that you want it to work differently, or you think you have a good idea about how something should behave, or you have a question about something you're seeing, open a GitHub issue on that repo. I think that's one of the best ways to provide that team feedback, and they are actively monitoring it, and it goes straight to the engineers. So, this isn't some giant, megacorp thing that you have to work through layers of support or anything. You're gonna get straight to the people that you want to get to with your issues.
Yeah, and like just open up an issue. Here's where you can voice your voice. So cool. And I see in the chat we have quite a few people here. So hey everyone, thanks from the team for being here and joining us. I'm sure I'm going to do things that at your desk you're going to cringe. You're going to be like, "Oh my God, why is Adam doing it this way?" But that's how we learn, and we'll cringe together.
We're gonna learn this together.
And by the way, someone did say Doug Toppin said containers from bare metal couches. I like that. It's a nice way of putting it. So okay, let's get into it. So this is the GitHub page for Copilot, and what we're going to do is basically I just want to get started. So I know there's a wiki that kind of walks us through the getting started process. So I'm not going to read to you. I think everyone's capable of doing that on their own. But I will say, we talked about this being opinionated. But what does that mean? Well, when we talk about building in AWS, there's things you have to consider outside of just building a container and deploying it, right? We have to have a network, which means we have to have our virtual private cloud. We have to have, if our application is going to be fronted by a load balancer, we have to think about configuring a load balancer. We have to configure security groups, IAM roles. There's quite a few things that go into getting that container up and running, right? So there's a lot behind the scenes that has to happen before you can run that container. Well, with Copilot, at least from the, when we read through the intro page, it handles a lot of that for us. So that's the opinionated nature of this, is taking AWS well-architected best practices and handling all of that behind the scenes. So I just focus on, here's my Docker file. I want this deployed. Help me do it.
Yeah,
So
and one of the things that I had been thinking about for a long time, that I hope Copilot makes use of is, when you're writing a Docker file, you're already describing in Dockerfile format a lot of the information about your app. Like you're going to say, that it listens on port 3000 or whatever. Um, so I'm going to be really curious to see if this tool, uh, you know, if you're doing things manually, you take that information and then you have to plug it in, like a few different places along your journey. You have to, make sure that your security groups are have that port open. You make sure that your listener for your load balancer is forwarding traffic to that port, and so on and so forth. So I really hope that by just having it in one place, the place that you have to have it in the Docker file, that Copilot sort of figures it out from there and just populates it the whole way through. That'll be one way that I can see, kind of an advanced level of functionality.
yes, and you know, something to point out there is, when you have a Docker file, you want to expose it on a port. In your Docker file syntax, there is an expose instruction. So if I'm saying expose on 3000, expose on 8080, yeah, shouldn't. Why do I have to then tell you that 5 other times,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah,
So
but that's how it's
I
been, historically. So hopefully this tool, since it's bringing its opinion, then it should know how do we do that. Um,
so yeah.
while you're installing, let me address a couple of the questions in chat. Uh, Doug Toppins, hopefully I'm saying that right, says, I've been using the Fargate CLI with no complaints. Is there any overlap with Copilot, or are they completely independent? I would say there's a little bit of overlap, but they're also completely separate. This is an official AWS CLI, whereas the Fargate CLI was written by an AWSer, but not it's not something that is back, to my knowledge, is not backed by an engineering team at AWS. And I could be wrong. I don't know what the status of that project is. It was a great project. I loved using it too. But I think this is going to take it quite a bit further. And the angle that the Copilot CLI is coming from is full developer experience. So we hope that by the end of this, we'll get to see some additional things that it can do. And then does Copilot tell you how much it'll cost when deployed with all of these automated things? I'm gonna guess no. I haven't looked, yet, but that would be some pretty sophisticated uh, information. So to try and figure out. Um, that said, that would be an interesting thing, an interesting feature to have at least some kind of cost estimation. So yeah, that would be cool. We should add that. Hey, go add that as a feature request in the GitHub issue tracker.
Exactly.
That would be fun. That would probably be really fun for someone to tackle.
Yeah. And it looks like the team's already answering some of those questions, which is nice as well.
Yeah, sweet.
Because again, these are the people behind the scenes building this and making it better. So
Yeah, I
um,
did. They're working on Task Run right now. I mean, where do you get this kind of information, this insider information? This is pretty great.
well, you get it from Containers from the Couch, starring Brent and Adam. Anyway, I kid, I kid. One other thing you may notice is I'm not wearing a hat today. I have this red mark on my forehead because I've been wearing hats so much that I finally decided today I'm going to do my hair. So I want you all to know it's a special day because I've done my hair.
I
It
think,
happens very rarely.
I think old ladies do their hair once a week too.
For me, it's like once every 3 months now. So I really, everything's changed.
Yeah.
Okay. So back to Copilot. So one thing I've done is I, I did install this prior to starting, but so we have it working. I've confirmed Copilot CLI. So if I do Copilot help, I'm able to see the output from the command. So already let's just talk about it from a command line experience. So I've run Copilot help. If I don't go through the documentation, it seems like it's pretty straightforward. It gives me an idea of what commands I need to run to get started. So we're going to start with a simple Nginx demo app. If you look at my Dockerfile, I'm simply building from Nginx latest image, and I'm exposing on port 80. That's it. Okay. Doesn't get
That's
much
pretty
simpler than
basic.
this.
Yeah.
And the idea is I want it to be basic to start because I want to just deploy something. And then we're going to go on and we're actually going to deploy. If you've been watching us the past couple of weeks, we've been going through ecsworkshop.com and eksworkshop.com. And we have a sample polyglot 3-tier load balancer, front end, back end application stack. And I want to start seeing if we can deploy some of those. So I'm going to stop talking about this and let's get into it. So again, let's do Copilot help. And it's telling me to run an init. So an init is going to create a new ECS application. And from what I've seen and read is it should walk me through this. Okay. So, you know what? Before I do that, it says it's best to run this from Git repository. So let's Git init this really quick. Git commit. I'm just going to
Yeah,
Git
good call.
status. All right.
I
Let's do
mean,
Git init.
normally this would be a Git repository, so that makes perfect sense.
Exactly. And the other ones are, by the way, just this
Yeah.
one's not Dockerfile. Spelling. Okay. So we're going to do Copilot init again. And it's asking me questions. So what would we like to name our application? I'm going to name it Nginx because I'm just running Nginx. And it's giving me options to determine my service architecture. Am I going to put a load balancer in front of it, or is it a back-end service that maybe the front end talks to? So I'm going to say a load balance service here. And then what do I want to name this web service? So I've given the application a name, and now I'm giving the service a name. So the way I'm understanding this is the application is kind of the overarching environment for my application. But then within an application, I run ECS services. And a service is a way to essentially run your container and define how many tasks you want to run in that service and health check it and so on. So let's name it Nginx front end. And it's asking me what Dockerfile do I want to use. I'm going to use the Dockerfile in this repo, which again, if you remember, so when I catted I ran a cat on the Dockerfile, I'm pulling Nginx latest, and I'm exposing it on port 80. So my assumption is, actually, forget my assumption. Look here. It said we're going to set up a load balanced web service named Nginx front end, and it's going to listen on port 80. So that's pretty cool. Is it took that data from my Dockerfile, because I didn't say that anywhere. If you look at my responses, nowhere did I say, here's my port that I want to run this on. It just recognized that my Dockerfile is doing this. So that should be enough. So what's happening is it looks like it's creating the infrastructure for this service to run and to manage the services under this application. So it created a manifest. So we'll actually look at that manifest in a moment. But that manifest is a YAML file, which is a representation of how I want to deploy this service. Let's actually take a look while it's building some of the other stuff. And my understanding is it takes a few minutes because what's happening is, as I mentioned earlier, if you recall, I mentioned there's a VPC we need ECR repos, we need subnets, security groups, IAM roles. There's a lot that goes in an ECS cluster, which to me is, that's the easiest part, but it's building all of that for us. And this should just be a one-time thing, right? I'm not building new infrastructure every time I'm going to actually run like a Copilot deploy, right? It's just to build all the back-end resources that I need.
Yeah, that makes sense. And this is actually for developers just getting started, this is very often the hardest part, for them, is figuring out all the crap that they need. And then, having someone come in a month to 6 months later and say, you did it all wrong and we have to redo it all, So I guess Copilot is really going to help with that. It's going to, it's going to be difficult to come in and say, you did it all wrong when this is, one of the AWS recommended ways of doing things. So, yeah, and you don't have to know everything that's happening. You just know that it's happening for you. So that's pretty handy.
Exactly. So let's see. Okay, perfect. So now we have, so this was the manifest YAML it created. And just looking through this, we can see we named our service. So again, the service is the actual thing that's running my Nginx container. That's the definition of my container, how many instantiations of that container do I want running, and so on. And then my service type, my image. So what's nice is it should be building this Docker image for me. But let's go back here. Let's look at the response. So, all right. So what did it do? It created a manifest. It created all the infrastructure to manage the services for my Nginx application. And now we're ready to go for local development. So do we want to deploy a test environment? What do you think, Brent?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it.
I mean, we can't be too risky with this Hello World style application.
I agree with that. So, okay, so it looks like it's deploying. So now it's creating the infrastructure for the test environment. And all those things I mentioned, hey, look, it mentions it here too. So that's pretty awesome that the CLI is in real time deploying these resources, and it's giving me a status on these resources being created and what's happening. So remember I said the cluster was the easiest part? Look how fast that was.
Okay, so it's creating a VPC on two AZs, internet gateway, public subnets, private subnets, routing tables, and then ECS cluster to hold your services, application load balancer to distribute traffic. I actually kind of think it's cool that it also explains why each of these elements exist. I mean, I know why application load balancer exists and what it's going to be doing for me, but not everyone would. And so that's kind of a nice touch.
Yeah, I agree. Especially with, we keep talking about developer experience and kind of this application first mindset where I'm just focused on my application. I don't want to focus on all this other boilerplate. But
Yeah.
it's still nice to know what all the boilerplate does, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So this is
Because
cool.
there may come a day when I need to go and track down, uh, how all this stuff works. And so seeing that, the ALB is what's responsible for distributing traffic at least gives me a good first step for going and finding that.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Also, ALB is the longest service, for sitting around and waiting for it to come up and be available. So,
yeah. So while we wait for that to come up, let's continue to look at our manifest file. And I
one
hope we can.
question I had is the CPU and memory 256 and 512. Um, I I get memory 512. Do you know what is CPU 256? What is that like? That doesn't compute for me. Wouldn't it be like one CPU or?
Yeah. So these are the units, right? So when you talk containers, containers don't, you can, the idea is you want to uh, use only the resources you need, right? So these are, so a full vCPU, like a virtual CPU would be one, but you can actually use fractions of a CPU when running containers, right? So
Okay.
in this example here, we only need 256 CPU units, which is out of a thousand. Look at it like out of 1,024, right? A full CPU. I'm
Gotcha.
just taking a fraction of that CPU. Does that make
So,
sense?
yeah, so this is basically building for me a quarter of a CPU and a half gig of RAM, and there's going to be one of them. So earlier, someone in chat was asking about, figuring out costs and stuff like that, and Boss Fighter X also asked, is AWS free? So cost clearly is something that people are, especially probably early developers are, focusing on. You can take this information and you can go back and look up, on the Fargate pricing page and figure out how much is this container going to cost. And then, add on ALB, add on, VPC and Internet Gateway, and so on and so forth. And you could probably get a pretty good approximation of what this is going to end up costing.
Yeah, and the pricing is always publicly accessible, but I can understand,
Yeah.
as you said, Brent, it's a good point that you're not just paying for the compute. There's other things that you pay for too. So, but you can always access it on our pricing pages.
Yeah.
Okay. So look at what happened here. It created my load balancer, my cluster, all my resources I needed. And then it's building my Docker file. So Brent, remember the old days when our pipelines would have a Docker build and then a Docker push? I don't know what that is anymore. I don't even have to worry about that. Copilot just did it for me.
That's cool. Yeah, it just totally built the Docker file and then pushed it to an ECR registry that it must have built itself. That's kind of cool. I didn't have to go out and build an ECR, space place to put this image. I like
And
that.
yeah, it's just automatically built and pushed. So it deployed. So now if you're ready for my really fancy web application, there it is. I just deployed an Nginx web app that
Uh,
looks like it's from 1996,
yeah,
AOL.com,
it's the official Nginx web app.
but it's kind of amazing, right? The cool thing here is we we had a Docker file, and our as a developer, I really just wanted to focus on the Docker file and my code. Now, this is a very simple, easy example, but what it did was it deployed all of this for me without me having to think about all that other stuff behind the scenes. So
So
let's play. Go
I
ahead.
see in chat real quick a follow up to the quarter CPU thing. O1 Pollock says, "Wait, what does quarter of a CPU mean? Does that mean you have limited amount of clock speed?" No. That's the cool thing about the way Docker works is if you have a bunch of containers that are all running at the same time on, and sharing CPUs. This is sort of a way to prioritize one over the other, is to be able to assign it more CPU resources than the other containers. And then it's sort of like in the Linux, on the command line, nicing an application down, you lower its priority. This is a way of doing that using Docker. Having more vCPU allows it to have access to more compute cycles. Having less vCPU, anytime there's contention and there's a line, less is going to be further back in the line. But if there's no line, if there's no waiting, then everyone gets access to the CPU as quickly as they can get it.
And in the Fargate world, your application you deploy, your task is the only task running on that instance. And now, granted, there's like an ECS container that runs, right, to make sure it gets in the cluster. But with Fargate, it's a one-to-one mapping. So I'm not competing with other services on that backend virtual machine.
Exactly. Yeah. And we do use this to figure out what size instance to drop to drop the container onto. So, don't expect an application that would benefit from having like 8 full cores available to it. If you give it a quarter CPU, it's not going to run as fast. If you give it, if you size it up and have it, get 8 full CPUs, 8192, in that situation, hey, great, it's going to run super fast. But that's mainly because it's going to be put onto a faster instance. It's going to be, running on a bigger instance. It's also the relationship in Fargate, the relationship between the CPU you assign and the memory that it gets. Those both are on a sliding scale and they kind of slide together. So you're going to have a lot more memory to work with, on a bigger instance with a higher amount of CPU assigned.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So we deployed our app, and just going through Copilot here, if I look at the options, so gosh, I didn't even read this, but it's exactly basically how we had worded it, right? Like an app is a collection of services and environments. So if I do Copilot App LS, I see I have my Nginx app, Copilot App Show Nginx. There we go. I can see what environments I have, to what accounts they're deployed to, which is actually really cool because it is common to have multiple accounts, right? So your production account will house your production applications, but you may have a sandbox account, and so on. So that's cool.
That is cool.
And we have our service here. So let's dive into the service. So going back to the Copilot GitHub wiki here. So we played around with the app syntax. Let's dive into the service syntax here, because there's some cool stuff here that I kind of want to look at. So let's go to Copilot SVC, and let's see. Let's do an LS. I have my Nginx front end, so that's cool. And package will actually show me the CloudFormation template for that service. So that's pretty cool. If I wanted to just deploy this outside, it's like kind of like your exit strategy. Here's your CloudFormation. Now you can manage it on your own.
Yeah.
And deploy. So Copilot, we could do a service deploy, which would, I guess, is rebuild the image and then deploy it. Reading this,
it detected there was nothing to change.
Yeah.
Nice.
So that's cool. Maybe not a red X. I don't know, because I feel like everything was good with the build. It just wasn't a.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Is that a failure when the service is deployed? Like, I don't know.
So, and then let's see, exit code.
Deep thoughts.
So, hey, maybe it would be cool to not do maybe like I don't know, a yellow marker saying nothing failed, but we had nothing to deploy.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway,
So
maybe I'll open up an issue.
I'm curious, thinking ahead to the workshop app. Um, One thing that it needs is environment variables. So how do we get environment variables worked in?
That's a
Let's
great
figure that
question.
out. Should we
Let's
just move
figure.
on to the workshop?
Let's move on to the workshop. All right, let's do it.
Because I
Let's
think
deploy a
environment
real app.
variables is something that, like people are going to have. So I'm sure that's part of this equation here.
Okay. All right. So let's go back. So Copilot.
Also, this was written in Ruby, so it's going to take a while to build.
That's a good point. Ruby on Rails. Okay. So I wonder, would I deploy this under the same app, or should I deploy this as a new app?
A new app, because it's the three together should be in the same collection. But yeah, I do think this is a new app that it has nothing to do with the Nginx one you just did.
All right. So let's do it. Let's do a knit.
Like you could call it workshop.
I would not like to use an existing application. I would like to name it ECS Workshop. Okay, so we're going through that same process. We're going to build the environment, build the infrastructure. This takes a few minutes. Oh, no language bashing. I don't think we were bashing on Ruby. I think it was just simply
I was bashing.
I was trying to protect you, Brent. I'm sorry.
Also, did you get the pun bashing? But still, I picked Ruby, and I picked it on purpose. But at the same time, I do like to bash on it a little bit. It has its shortcomings, but it has its niceties also.
Yeah, and you could say that about any language. Come on,
Totally.
they all have their pluses and minuses. So one thing that's cool to note is behind the scenes for our infrastructure state is Copilot is using CloudFormation. So take this from me. Let Copilot manage your CloudFormation. Don't you try to modify and delete that CloudFormation.
Yeah. This
I
is
did
cool
that.
though. What all does it build? So there's your Cloud 9. So starting after that, moving up, you have the infrastructure roles. So that's bound to be some IAM permissioning, stuff like that.
Yep.
Yep.
Giving
Okay.
giving roles. Okay.
Yep. Then what do we have? Stack set.
Yes.
We're
So
getting fancy.
so this is creating. It looks like the ECR repo. Oh, was this? Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah, I do remember that it built an ECR repo like one of the very first things,
Yep.
which I guess makes sense because if you're going to be using Copilot, you're going to have containers. Containers need registries.
Yep.
So go ahead and, build that. That does make sense.
Yep.
And KMS key for encryption, um, pipeline. Oh, the pipeline build artifacts and the bucket policy. I don't know, by the way, is the screen blurry for anyone else or is it just my eyes? It could
Oh,
totally just be my eyes.
that's good to point out. If it is, please let us know. And there's probably nothing I can do to fix it. So there's that.
I'll wipe my monitor off.
Yeah, so there it is. Okay.
Okay, so
So
then Nginx test, what did it build?
yeah, so this was this old from 1219? Okay. ECS cluster.
Yep.
Oh, and test represents the environment, by the way.
Oh, this is okay. So this is the main enchilada for the rest of the resources. So this is where we're getting the VPC, the NAT gate or the internet gateway, and so on and so forth. Okay,
Yes.
so it looks like our app has been initialized.
So let's do Copilot init. This is going to be again. So now we have our app. Now we're going to deploy a service. So I'm just going to follow like what we do in the workshops, ECS demo front end. We have our Docker file. It's in the directory.
Yep.
So let's let it create. And let's actually look at that Docker file, because I think that's cool to point out.
Yeah.
ECS demo front end. Let's open that sucker up. There he is. Sometimes Cloud9, you don't want to be my friend. Okay. So let's look at that Docker file. So this is our Docker file for the front end service. This is for our workshops. Again, if you ever want to run through one of our workshops for ECS or EKS, it's just the name of the service. So ecsworkshop.com or eksworkshop.com. It doesn't use Copilot yet, but anyway, just if you were curious of those sample apps. So in our Docker file, we've defined our from, what image we want to build from, where our code is going to be, where we're going to actually put our code in, and then what commands we run to build and run. And the thing to note here is expose on 3000 and our entry point. So I wonder, I don't know this, does health check get picked up?
Oh, that'll be interesting to see, because that could be used in a couple of different places. We could use it from the ALB, and I would expect that we do. And then secondarily, there's all ECS itself also has the ability to health check. Um,
Yeah.
Looks like it gets picked up for a backend service, but not for a load balanced web service. Okay, cool. Well, if we make it to deploying a backend service, we'll check that out.
Yeah.
The load balanced
Perfect.
one is probably just taken care of by the ALB health check, which makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. So just going back to the environment that's created, you see we have our load balancer. So this is creating target groups, ECS cluster. Again, everything you need to have an environment to run your containers. That's what this is doing.
Gotcha.
Route tables. I do see a service discovery namespace. That's a good sign. I like service discovery. So let's see, just looking in the chat. Yep, exactly what you said. Perfect. So Brent, you were right as to how the health checks work. Fine. Okay. All right. So this is, taking a few minutes, of course, because it's building the environment. Everything's been built with the exception of the ALB, the application load balancer. That takes a few minutes. But I can't wait to see our front end application, and because I want to get on to the back ends. Actually, maybe I should do that.
We still need to define at some point before we get to the back ends, we'll need to pass in some environment variables.
Yes, that's a good point.
But I see what you're doing here. You're working ahead a little bit. That makes sense.
That's what I was thinking. You know what? Let's look at the environment. So one thing that's really important for our front end application is, so front end, it's DNS, right? It's public DNS. You come in through the load balancer. But when the front end service needs to talk to the back end services, it needs service discovery. So what we need is environment variables to enable the service discovery piece, because that's how the front end knows what those endpoints are. It's through an environment variable. So let's go to the Copilot directory, ECS demo, our name of our app, and let's open up this manifest and hopefully find where we can source environment variables. So,
wait, no, that's environments. So it would be like a secret, but it's not technically a secret.
Okay, let's go to the documentation. Well, let's go to, don't know where to go. Using, okay, so service, oh, wait, I just saw it, environment vars. Yeah. So is this under development? How do I add my, there it is. Oh, nice.
Okay, yeah,
Nice. Your
that makes it easy.
documentation led me to where I needed to go. Well
That's
done.
right. Plus, plus for good documentation. Also for having it on GitHub. That's awesome.
Yes. Okay. So I'm just going to put this here. Now I have to remember what those environment variables are.
True. Yeah, now we have to figure that out.
So you know what? I know it's in the CDK here. Here we go. Okay. And all right. So here are environment variables.
Yeah.
I'm going to paste them in here and then clean it up. Now, one thing we also have to figure out is what is the name of our service discovery?
Because this service discovery strategy that that we're using for our CDK example, which is on the workshop today, is going to be different than the strategy that might get used here using Copilot. So we'll need to confirm that.
Yeah. So let's see. So I'm just going to get this here. This.
Oh, you know, there were some variables that were defined by default. Was region one of them?
Good catch. It looks like it's not.
Okay.
But by you having me go back here, I can see service discovery endpoint. So the value is app name.local. So it'd be ECS workshop, ECS demo front end .local.
That sounds right. Oh, wait, there's a service discovery guide.
Yes. Okay. We're going to the service discovery guide. Well done.
I feel like Kun3FE is cringing right now.
We're doing our best, okay? Come on. I said there was going to be a lot of cringe here, so we did say that. Okay. So it's app.name.local, right? So we have api.kudos.local. So I already forgot what I named the service. So ECS demo front end. What's the name of my app? Oh, it's building our Docker image now. So that's
good.
cool.
It'll still be doing that in like 30 minutes.
Sometimes you just want to pack those Docker images with everything out there.
I hope your Cloud9 is huge.
It actually is. It's an M5 large. Just to be safe.
Good. We might get to see this.
So Copilot App LS. So my app name is ECS Workshop.
Oh, that's handy. Okay.
So I have app name ECS Workshop dot, and then we'll just name it this ECS Demo Crystal dot local. Does that look right? ECS Workshop dot ECS that. Okay. So, oh, yeah, I did it right. I swear I did not look in the chat. Did I do that right? No, I didn't.
No, you have it backwards. I was going to say, I feel like this should be backwards. Because you go top level, then, sort of medium level, then very specific.
That totally makes sense. I don't know what my brain was doing right there. I just have to be honest.
No, it's all good.
Okay, so we've set our endpoints, our environment variables. That's really nice. By the way, this wasn't hard to figure out.
No.
So that's really cool. Okay, so ECS demo -crystal.ECS workshop.local. Perfect. Okay, so we have our environment variables. Once our app's done deploying, oh, look, that build wasn't so long, Brent. It's just pushing now.
Yeah, fair enough. I have just sat through it so many times that, I can't begin to tell you how much I hate it.
I hear you. I hear you. Well, maybe we'll make that a backlog item. We'll optimize it one day.
Yeah, that'd be
And
fun to do live on Twitch.
deal. Um, okay, so it's deploying that image. Let's see if I can beat it right now. Oh, oops, I didn't want to go there. I wanted to go here. So here's our cluster, ECS Workshop test. So remember, it's app name environment so for our cluster. So we're deploying our service. There it is. So again, so it deployed our Fargate service.
Oh, let's get 3 tasks. How would we do that?
Yes, I
Before the
like
big
doing this.
reveal, because otherwise it's almost as boring as the Nginx app.
Okay. Well, it's at least a little prettier. It's got a nice image. Come on.
If
Okay.
we had 3, it would be amazing.
All right. So I did that. Now, so there's going to be that with our environment variables on the next deploy. And
Oh,
so when this
perfect.
deploy is happening, what's happening is it's deploying to ECS. It's waiting for the task to come up and run, report healthy. Once that's done, I imagine the service, the Copilot CLI is going to come back and say, hey, you're all good.
You think we're going to be able to get us in the next 10 minutes, along with maybe one of the backends?
Well, let's go to the back end.
This is my way of hurrying Adam along.
Node.js, thank you. So Copilot, again, I want to do Copilot App init. Don't forget that T. I would like to use an existing application. Yes. Look at that. That's nice.
Oh,
That's fancy.
that's handy. Little selector.
So Copilot init. So
So
now
you
this is
app init and then you init.
yes. And
Okay.
so now this is a backend service we're creating. We haven't done that yet. ECS demo was Node.js. Yep. There's our Docker file. Great.
One thing that I can see that would be handy for the service name is offer up a suggestion for using the current directory name.
Oh,
Almost
that's cool.
everyone, almost everyone names their Git repo, after whatever their service name is going to be. So I get, having the ability to not call it that, but I bet 90% of the time it's going to be that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Feature request. Okay. So Copilot App LS. I want to do Copilot App, I think, show ECS Workshop. So look at that. Man, this is really cool, actually. I'm really digging this.
Yeah.
So I have my ECS Workshop app, which again is a 3-tier. And then in my services, you can see I have the front end and the back end, which I'm deploying right now, the back end. Oops. Would you like to deploy test environment?
Of course.
So is this going to deploy another cluster for this service? I'm guessing yes.
Guessing no. I bet it does cluster per app. Or wait, I'm getting
Same
confused between
cluster.
app and service.
App is the collection of services.
Okay.
So you were right.
Okay.
It's been confirmed. So cool. So a
Yeah,
cluster per
perfect.
environment. That's
That's what we
awesome.
would want because these things are going to use service discovery to talk to each other. So yeah, that's
You
that's
need
going to
that.
work great.
So there it goes. So Brent, am I not allowed to look at the service yet, the front end, because you want the
Not
3?
well. Have you deployed the change with the 3 and the environment variables?
So now what I need to figure out is how do I deploy just this service? So I think I'm going to do Copilot service. Deploy. I'm in the directory. Okay, so this is cool. So there were no changes to my Dockerfile, but obviously there were changes in the manifest file. So it caught that. And that's actually,
Nice.
if you look at the service discovery, there's our namespace.
Yep. Oh, and we could have looked at that and figured out the right naming scheme also. And by the way, in chat, Kohi Dave says, "OMG, the image push from Cloud9 is so fast." Heck yeah, that's one reason I always use Cloud9. Back when I used to fly on airplanes, I would even like, dev over airplane Wi-Fi to Cloud9, and then I could push pull and do whatever I needed to do, talk to AWS APIs, and I never really had to worry about Wi-Fi connectivity. Um, and then Kun3FE says, so if you have a test environment, oh, see, I'm totally exaggerating that, and you don't mean it for it to be exaggerated. So if you have a test environment, then you get one test cluster, and if you have a prod environment, then you get a separate prod cluster. And yeah, it looks like I would even expand that a little bit, and I would say it's also then per app. So we see by the cluster name, there's the ECS Workshop test cluster, and then there would be an ECS Workshop prod cluster, and then separate app would get its own app name test cluster and app name prod cluster. And by having that, you would then be able to deploy, changes to your test environment and see that you like them, that you're happy with them, and you're ready for those to go out to production. And so then you could promote them to your production cluster from there.
Yep. So it looks like our Node.js app is flapping. So am I missing an environment variable there? I bet you I'm missing something.
I don't remember it needing. Let's look at, yeah.
And I think this just.
Okay, so this could have been like my really. Why is it? It says it's unhealthy.
The health check is not reporting back.
Okay, so what is the health check that's in the Docker container?
Let's go here, and I'm on the front end. So the front end finished deploying, by the way. Which Perfect. Can I please look at it or no?
Not yet, not. Because now I want the payoff of seeing this talking.
So mean. All I want to see is that front end. Okay.
You know what? Well, let's for our own experimentation, let's delete the health check from the Dockerfile and build and push again. Okay. And then we'll go back and figure it out, because I feel like curling to HTTP localhost and all that stuff is probably not the best health check anyway. And that could be like failing in this particular container. Cool. And I think I've never actually caught that error before, because I've never actually set that health check up in any kind of official way until now. But since Copilot does it for me, it probably caught that that's the wrong way to health check this container.
Okay, but let's look here. Okay, so here you go. Here's our health check for the Node.js service. So here's the definition for our health check.
Which I assume it got straight out of the Dockerfile. Yeah, that looks exactly like what it was. So yeah, we should probably, like I said, I don't think I've ever validated that worked. I think I've just never actually tried to use it before as a health check.
Cool. So it is. So I removed it now, and now we're redeploying, and we should be good at that point. But just to we're getting close on time here, but yeah, one thing it's cool to see is I could also access logs. By the way, I saw this somewhere. I could do Copilot, and I could do service, and then I can do logs for that particular service. So rather than, if you notice, I was going into the console trying to look at things, I could do it right here using that Copilot, the CLIs. ECS demo, was it Node.js? Oh, so maybe, oh wow, this is really slick. Cool. Oh, and then there's also, I bet you there's a, let's see. Let's do logs help. I bet you there's a follow button, follow command. Yep.
Nice.
If I follow and I choose that. Cool. So it looks like, what is this here? I'm not sure. is this like the log group? I'm not sure
Yeah,
exactly.
that's probably the app ID would be my guess, like the task ID or something. Um, we could probably go back and correlate that if we wanted to.
Okay, but so what do we got here? We have perfect. We have 3 front ends and the back end. Can we do the reveal, Brent?
Let's do it.
It's killing me. Okay, it's reveal time. Oh,
how do we know what our load balancer address is?
I was just going to say that. How do I know? Oh, come on. I need my help in the chat. Copilot
service
show ECS demo front end. Show me load balancer.
There it is. What? Yeah, that's it right there. Nice. Oh.
Oh, we were so close.
We were. Okay, so this is my fault. This isn't Copilot's fault. But we see the text. So the way the image rendering works is based on
tag.
It's based on. So I had to do some really, really terrible developer-y things that no one else should ever have to do. And one of them is I have a hard-coded expectation of what IP address you're going to be. And based on that, I figure out what availability zone you're on. And then based on that, the image gets rendered. So Copilot sets up in a different IP space, totally fine. We see that it's working. We just don't get the images that we were really hoping to get. But you know what? For Copilot, I'm going to go back and I'm going to continue my hard coding and add in the IP space that Copilot builds because we want this demo to work, and we are super close to having it work. So that's really awesome.
I mean, so just think about what we did there. This is really cool. So we've never used Copilot. We came in here, we tried to just do kind of pure CLI experience with a little help from the documentation. We were able to deploy our front end, our back end, kind of experiment with it, view logs. This is super cool. And this is in beta, but I imagine, we're getting closer to GA one of these days, but it's feeling like a solid tool.
It does. It feels GA worthy. So Twitch, thanks for joining. Try out Copilot, open issues. We even threw out some suggestions. So definitely if you agree, then open those up as issues yourself and take all the credit. We don't need it. So definitely, give your feedback on the GitHub repo, try out Copilot yourself, and join us tomorrow. We're going to be back at the same time, and we're going to be continuing to explore stuff from the containers ecosystem.
Yes. And hey, just maybe for tomorrow, just a thought, we take Copilot to the next level and look at some of the pipeline stuff that it builds for you. Because if you know one thing about me, Brent, I like pipelines, and I like building pipelines.
All right. Cool. That's what we're doing tomorrow. Come back tomorrow, and until then.